Hello, hello.
How's it going?
Good, thanks.
Cool.
It's a bit tired of a Monday. Otherwise, good.
Yeah. Right, so I'm just gonna actually get started now. Yeah, since there's so much I actually want to get through. Right, let's start recording. Okay, cool. Hi everyone, my name is Martin. I'm part of the FEDSA mentoring team, and this is our JavaScript 1 session 2. We will be looking at array methods as well as I think import and JS docs. Okay, let's get started. I'll just start sharing my screen. If I start repeating stuff that I covered last week, please just let me know, because I haven't got our sort of curriculum 100% set yet, so I might end up repeating some stuff from last time. But I don't think I will. But if I do, just please let me know. Okay. So you should all be able to see my screen. Okay. Can one of you just confirm that you can see my screen?
Can see it.
Yeah, I can see it.
Cool. Right. Okay, so let's get started here. So the first things first is what we've got here is just a basic JavaScript file, and we're importing it over here, or we're basically referencing it, and we've got a problem. It says to us immediately, cannot use import statement outside of a module. And this catches a lot of people out, myself included, when first started out, because you don't know how you can actually import files. So what do you do? And the answer is actually a very, very basic fix. All you got to do is basically go to where you're importing a JavaScript file, and you're just going to say type is equal to module. Okay, save, and now you can see my error has gone away. So in the future, whenever you start your coding, you will be using your import statements like this. So just don't forget that you actually need to declare that your script is a module type. Okay, cool. So let me show you the data that we've got here today. Okay, so we've got, there's an object here. Sorry, it's an array of different objects. And what you're going to be looking at is different array methods. We're going to be dedicating a whole session to array methods with a little bit of other things on the side, like JS docs, just because they are so important. Before I move on, I want to encourage you that once you get to the stage where you are needing to know about your array methods, that you do go and try and do a few lead coding exercises. So that's going to places like HackerRank, I think it's Code Wars. There are these websites. You just got to search lead coding exercises, and basically it'll be like a words question that you need to. It'll ask you to try and solve a specific problem, and most of the time these problems will be solved by chaining your array methods. So that's why it's so important to know them, is that you could reduce really, really bad code down to just a couple of lines of chaining methods. Okay, so we did sort of touch on them last time, but now I actually want to go a bit more in depth and just look at the three main ones, which is map, filter, and reduce. Okay, so the first one we'll go through is map. Now, I guess I should preface this that when I say array methods, what we're talking about is that if there was an array, so let's just say there's an array here. Now, when I go and try and I put dots with this array, there's all these different methods that are available to me. So because it's an array, it now has sort of all these special powers, that basically you can go and do just purely because it's an array. So these won't pop up if it's, for example, like an object. So now if I go dot, there's no more push and all of that. And if it's a string, a string's got its own methods. So if I do this, now you'll see now we've got split, which is from a string, to lowercase. So these are all methods associated with your data type, and the ones that we want here are the array methods. So that's why they're called array methods. It's just methods that are available to you because it's an array. Okay. All right. So first one we're going to be covering here is map. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go and map over my products. Actually, before that, what I'll do is actually just do a for each. Okay, so instead of doing a for loop as we usually do like this, so let I is equal to 0, I is less than products.length plus, then we can console log products are. Okay, so that's going to loop through each item. Okay, but people don't like the syntax. They feel that the syntax is a bit hard to read, and what they prefer is syntactic sugar. Which means it does the same thing, it just looks better. And the way they do that is they use a for each. Well, that wasn't meant to happen. And the way you do that is just go products. So this is your array, and we're going to go dot for each. Okay, and then inside here, we've got an anonymous function. Every time there's going to be an anonymous function, it's basically like functional programming. So when we do a for each, or any, this is an array method as well. Whenever we do any of these array methods, inside it, we'll have a function. That's this anonymous function, yeah? Like, don't be scared of this right now. I know right now it's probably like, you look at it and you're like, oh, geez, it's what is that? It's basically just a function so that we can pass a parameter in so that we can work with it. That's the only reason why we're doing it like that. So what we've got here is we've got immediately this product, which is now, each time this is looping, it's doing the same as products are. So every time it runs, it's getting the next product, then it goes to the next one, the next one. And in case you do need an index, there are these hidden values in here. So if I do comma, you will see, here's all the different ones. So the first one was the value. Then the next one is the index. So if I was to put index here and console log this, it's going to actually be the index 0, 1, 2, 3, all the way to 9. Just the same as if I was to actually go console log R over here. Okay, so it's the exact same thing. Yeah, so for each is the exact same thing as a for loop. It's just a nicer looking one. Now, when you use a for each, that's when you just basically want to go and loop through your array, and you don't really want to do anything with it. You don't want to sort of alter any of the items inside it. But now, what if you did actually want to start altering the items? Okay, so for each doesn't actually return anything at the end of the day. But what we could have done is we could have actually used a map, which is going to do the same as for each, but we will have sort of an array that gets returned right at the end. So let's actually look at building it out. Why is this red there? Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to say there's a new array, and I'm going to say products.map. And just to show it's exactly the same, I can actually just take this exact same thing and just copy paste it over here. So that's completely interchangeable, map and for each. Now, the only difference that's going to be happening is that it's generating an array here as it's looping through it, and then that final array gets returned. So for each is not actually going to be returning, you're just looping through each item. Now, map is going to let you loop through each item, but if you manipulate an item inside, it's going to actually get returned in this new array. So, and I don't feel like I'm doing the greatest example of explaining that. So let me actually sort of do some practical exercises here. So I'm going to console log product to show you that each time it's looping through it, right? And then right at the end, I'm going to console log new array. Okay, so it's going to run through each of these items. And then what I'm doing then is console logging the array. But now when it's mapping through here, we're not actually returning any items. So what's actually happened is that it's created in a new array of the exact same number of elements, but it's undefined. So what I can do is I can actually return product here. And now what's happening is that it loops through each item and it returns each item. And then you've actually got this array at the end of the day. And now you might be like, as you're learning, you're like, why would you need to be returning an array? And the reason why this happens is because we don't want to be manipulating our items in an actual array. We don't want to be manipulating this initial products here. We want to be creating a new array so that we are not mutating our data. And it's very important we do that. Otherwise, what can happen is you manipulate it here, then this product's item gets manipulated on the inside of it, and then something else breaks. So we don't want to be mutating the data. We want to be doing things with new arrays or new objects. So that's why it's built this way, to go and return a new array like this. Okay. So map is the exact same thing as just a for each, except at the end it's actually returning that entire array. Now, something to note with map here is it's always going to return the exact same number of items that are in that array. You can't remove any items with a map. Like, I can't just go and say, like, if index is equal to 0, return nothing, like return null or whatever. Because what's going to happen here, for example, you can see where I've returned null for the 0 index. It's just null. So it's always going to map 1 to 1. If there's 10 items, it's always going to have 10 items at the end of it. Okay, so it's always like a one-to-one mapping. So where could we actually make use of map? Like you will use it a ton. Like in React, you use it. It's like the most used thing you'll be using in React. And the way that you normally do it is you would basically map through each item, and then you would return a div like this and say something like maybe product.name or whatever, product.id. So for each item, it's then going to generate a div container. But we're not going to have to worry. We're not really doing React now. Probably in about a month's time, we'll be looking at React. So let's look at other ways we can possibly use it. Say, here is our data here. What if we wanted to create like an ID name for each of these? So we do a combination of ID and cheese. So what we can do there is we say return product. Okay, actually, we're going to do a string literal, yeah, which is what we covered last week. And that's when we use backticks. And it lets us mix variables with just normal string text. So we put a $sign and then the curly brackets. Now this is now basically into code version or like code mode where we can put JavaScript code in here. And I'll go product.id and then let's do dash and then product.name. So what I've done here is I'm taking this ID and I'm putting a dash and I'm putting the product name here. So let's save it here. Okay, so now you can see we've created a whole new array. So it's a new array here that has now got the combination of the ID dash and then the product name. ID dash product name. Now I know this might not be the greatest use case here for you, but you will see that it becomes just such a great tool to use. Like you're just really going to need to know this stuff. Okay, so map is just one-to-one. It's super basic. I apologize if I haven't given you the best explanation here, but it just maps one-to-one to a new array. Okay, so that's map. Now let's look at filter. Sorry, let's take all of this out. Okay, so what we're going to do now is new filtered array. We're going to do filter. Okay, so products.filter. So we're doing the exact same thing again. Syntax is always going to be the same except when you are working with reduce. Okay, so and then inside here we're going to have our anonymous function, but we don't have any data to work with, and the reason why is because we aren't passing our actual product in. So this is, remember, this is the same as when we've got that sort of like a product-r when we're looping, doing a for loop. Okay, so let's just console log our products so that we know we can see it. Okay, so there's all of our products here. Okay, now filter, really, really awesome. It's really, really awesome. Remember, map will always be one-to-one when we're mapping out. We're always going to get the exact same list of items. Now, filter's coming in to change that. Filter will let you go and say, if it matches certain conditions, include this item. And if it doesn't match certain conditions, don't include this item. So let's take, for example, yeah, you can see we've got all of our products here. So let's look for any item where quantity is above 0. So quantity here means that they don't have any. So we want to know basically what items are in stock. If it's quantity is over 0, then we know that items are going to be in stock. Okay, so what we'll do is, while I'm logging, take note while I'm doing this. Can you see that I'm often console logging? And I'll actually even do this in a production setting just so that I know I am looking at the correct information. A lot of times people will go and they start coding and they end up writing so many lines of code without knowing, are they working with the right object? Are they working with the right data type? Like today, for example, I saw someone who was trying to map through their items, but they had an object. And they weren't console logging, so they didn't know that they were actually at an object in the first place. And so their code just wasn't going to work because they didn't realize. So often try and console log. See where you are, you know. You will hear people say to you, look, you should rather be doing test-driven development or testing instead of console logging. And that is correct in a different setting, like when you're at the workplace. But for learning purposes, you should be console logging so you can see what's happening with your code. Okay, so while I'm here, I actually want to know, I want to see. I want to log out quantity, right? So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually just going to go and, I'm going to go and do product.quantity and log it. And so I can see my values are coming through. So I know I'm working with it, right? Okay, so what we're going to do, or the way that filter works is that if an item is true, it gets returned into this final array or if it's false, it gets excluded. It's not going to be part of it. That's why it's filtering. You're filtering stuff out. Okay, so what we're going to say is that if product.quantity is greater than 0, we're going to return true. Otherwise, we could just say else, return false. Okay, so and then right at the end, what we want to look at now is we want to see our new filtered array and save. Sorry, go to console log. Okay, so what we've got now, we had our original. Actually, let me show you our original array here so that we can see the difference in items. So here's our initial array. It is 10 items. You can see the IDs go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and there's a mix of all data. Now, when we're filtering, you can see all these ones with zeros are now gone, and we've just got the ones with the quantity that's over 0. Now that's amazing. Like, imagine you had to try and code that by hand. You'd loop through every single thing, check if the quantity is 5, and then add it to a new array, and then finally return that new array. So there's a lot of steps that you've been able to cut out. With that being said, like, these array methods do come at a cost. They are a bit slower than just doing a straight out loop, because they've got sort of extra functionality and handling edge cases. Most of the time, vast majority of the time, it's not going to matter for you that they are a little bit slow, but it is just something that you should be aware of, that a for loop is always going to run faster than a map, for example. Okay, so we've now got our items filtering like this. I just want to show you that you could have actually made this just a little bit cleaner. Something that I like doing. Just have a look at this logic here. When we actually say if product quantity is greater than 0, then we say return true. And then we say else, return false. Now, this is redundant. We don't have to have this else here. So the reason why I say that is because if product quantity is greater than 0, it's going to return true. Then this code will never, ever run anyways. So you could actually take out this else and this, and then just save it. So now, if product quantity is greater than 0, it's going to return true. Otherwise, just return false. Okay, so that's now neatened it up a tiny bit. And then now you can step into a ternary operator. And I guess that will be today's first bonus. Let's have a very quick look at a ternary operator, just because I don't think we did cover it last time. So a ternary operator is basically, it's an if statement. So, sorry, let me just, if test is equal to true. True, else true, false. Okay. So a ternary operator will only ever work with a case like this, where there is two conditions, or sorry, it's like one condition that it tests, and then sort of two choices they can have, right? And it's basically a shorthand way of doing this if statement where it's either true or it's false. Okay, so this is how you'd basically do it. You'd say test is equal to true. Now, this is going to look really weird. You're going to put a question mark, and you're going to say, this is what's getting returned here, or what's getting returned at the end. So this is the exact equivalent of this. It's the exact same thing. There's no difference. And the reason why this has now come about is that you can now reduce your code to one line of code. So you will actually even see this in React as well. It actually comes from other languages, so it's popularized in other places, and it's found its way into JavaScript. So this is a ternary operator here, and let me just go over it again once more time. Here is your condition. Okay, then it's basically saying if test is equal to true, is it question mark, then do this, or else do that. Okay, so exact same equivalent. So the reason why I'm showing you that is that we could have gone and reduced this to a ternary. We could have gone and actually said return product.quantity is greater than 0. And if it is, return true. Otherwise, if it's not, return false. Okay, so now we did I make a mistake here? Sorry, it's because I got this garbage up here. Okay, so let me just take that out. Okay, so this is now the exact equivalent as this, because you're now using the ternary. So what we're doing, remember that our filter returns either true or it returns false, right? If it's true, we keep it. If it's false, it goes away. So what we do is we're actually putting a line of code here, and this code will evaluate to either true or false. So it's like basically saying const status is equal to, and then we can have this whole check here, and then return status. And this is either going to be true or false, but we don't have to have this additional line here, so we just go straight to just returning it like this. So you end up with your code just sort of being a lot neater. And then because it's an arrow function, and we didn't really go that much into arrow functions, we can actually omit this because it will actually automatically return after the arrow. So what we've now created is a one-liner, as they would normally refer to like in lead coding. But this can be much harder to read compared to what we first had. So whether you want to go and write your code like this is going to be up to you. But yeah, so you will hear about these one-liners because you look at it, it's actually just technically one line of code. Okay, so I'm gonna take this back out though because it's not so user friendly for beginners. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna revert it back to what we first had, and then we're gonna start chaining them. Okay, so filter. Sorry about this. Almost done. Any questions so far?
Nothing from my side.
Okay. You guys had me worried. I thought it was dead. Okay, sorry. Return true. I'm making such a mess of this. Sorry. Let me just do this properly. Return true. Else return false. Okay, so we got our filter working again. Okay, now let's look at reduce, and then we will actually start looking at chaining them. Okay, so now what we're going to do now is we're going to look at reduce. Okay, so we first had first had map, then we had filter, which is over here, filter, and now we're going to have reduce at the end. Now reduce is just so strong. It's like super OP. But it's just knowing of how to apply it though is something else. But people have done some like amazing sort of creative ways of using reduce to do sort of some cool things. Okay, so once again, we've got our exact same sort of method, sort of our like boilerplate for how we use these. And I'm going to call it a reduce array. And I'm going to say products. Now remember, no, we're not going to do .map or filter. We're going to do reduce. And then once again, anonymous function. Okay. Now, usually we've got our one product that we're always passing in. Remember, we pass in, it's this little function here, and we pass in product. But this time, product is the second value. Okay. So there's actually a total or accumulator that's actually sitting in the front here. So let me explain the way that this basically works. Okay, so the way the reduce works is that it's got one value that's called a total or accumulator, and each time your reduce runs, remember it's looping. Each time it loops, you can then add or do anything you want to the total, and then ultimately what you have after, let's say it's run 10 times, you've got this one total object or total value sitting right at the end. So as an example where it would be great is that if we had all of these prices here and we wanted to know all of the prices combined, we could have a total that would be 0, and then we would add product.price, and then it runs again. The next product.price, next one, and it adds all of the products or prices till you've actually got this one total. Okay. But now people get really clever with it, is that they might like have this as a data object. And then each time reduce is running, they're adding sort of information into this data object. So you basically take a whole bunch of values and reduce it down to one data object. So I know that's a bit of a vague explanation or a vague example there, but people use it like that to like come up with so many creative things. Like reduce blows my mind away when you start seeing people use like the lead coding challenges where they combine it. It's just crazy how some people think like that. Okay, so moving on. Now, there's one thing that catches people out when they reduce. We've got our total here, but JavaScript does not know what data type this is. And that's a problem, because what if we wanted this to be an array, right? So it runs first time, and we want to push something to it. So we say total dot push, and then it just say just nonsense. Okay, and let's save that. But oh, got a problem here. Total push is not a function, and that's right. It's what they're actually saying here is that this is not an array, so we can't do an array method, which is dot push. We can't do it because it's not an array. So that's the problem now. And the way we solve it is actually very basic. Is that right at the end of the function, which is almost like set interval and set timeout, there is an options here. So you push comma right at the end, and what you can say is what your initial value is. Now, this is probably like you're like kind of wondering like, oh, this is really confusing. What's the whole point of all of this? And it's actually just so basic. It's just basically that we need to go and tell JavaScript what data type this total is, so that when it runs the first time, it knows that it's allowed to do this or it's allowed to do that. So in this case, yeah, I'm doing an empty array so that we can total push it. Let's save it. Okay, so it's actually showing it's undefined, but let me get back to the moment. Yeah. So by doing that, it knows now exactly what. The reason why that's probably happening is because of that. Yeah. Okay. So it knows now what total is going to be, because total will initialize to this in the beginning. And let's say if we wanted to add like numbers, like we said earlier, then you could just make this 0, so that now when you're adding to it, it's just adding to 0. So I'm not going to add that in yet. We'll get to that in a moment. Right. Then there's one thing that has to happen here is that each time this runs for a reduce, you need to return this accumulator back. Otherwise, it's not going to know where this accumulator is. So each time it runs, it needs to go, and you need to just return this total each time. Okay, so let's actually use this. Let's put this into practice. And what we'll do is we'll actually reduce the prices, like I said earlier. We want to know what all of the prices are, just combined all of these together, right? So all we do is we basically say total is equal to total plus product dot price. Okay, and save it. And let's console log reduce array. And this is happening here. So you can see this is happening because it doesn't know that it's a number in the beginning. And there you go. So you see, because I didn't have that 0 there, we ended up with like a huge sort of mess, because it doesn't know this. First time it runs, it does not know what total is going to be. Total could be just anything. And in other programming languages, if you don't initialize something correctly, like, yeah, man, you end up with some strange like data values. Like I think in like C++, it's just some random number, like a 50-digit number. So yeah, we're going to add 0, so that total starts off at 0, and then each time it runs, it's now adding a price. Let's actually just console log the price that we're adding, and just say adding product.price. Save it. Okay, so we're adding all of these prices, and then we end up with this 120. Okay, so that's your basic reduce. Okay, so now these things are really, really powerful on their own. Like you can see that there's a lot of value that you can get from this. Just as an example here, imagine we made this as sort of an empty object, okay? And then what we could do is we could say total product dot name equal to product dot quantity. Okay, so now when I've reduced it, I've actually got an object, and for each object, or each time it's running, I'm actually creating a key, and I'm making the value of that key the quantity. So now you can see I've actually got this object here with all the different values in it. So you can see reduces not just for just putting numbers and making one final number at the end of the day. It's about reducing data to one single data object. And that's sort of where the strength comes in. Okay, so what we're going to do now is, let me just undo that. We're going to start chaining them. Okay, so let's just take that out. Right, so chaining. Right. So what chaining is that these methods can run right after each other, and then ultimately you end up with one final array. Because remember, they're each returning an array, so you could just keep manipulating. So what I mean by that is, I mean, you just go basically products dot map, right? And then remember, we could like map something out. We had all that code inside here, but I'm not going to write any code in for now. And then we can filter, then we can map again. Then we can you can filter, you can reduce after that. You could just keep going on and on and on and on and on and on and on. And I mean, then you can even start to lowercase. You know, you could just keep chaining these methods on and on and on. And that's where sort of like the real sort of creativity and strengths come in here. Now, usually there'd actually be code inside here though. I'm just making it a lot shorter because like I don't know what logic would go in there. But so you can chain all of these events together like that. So that's what we're going to be looking at now. Okay, so yes, our products object. Now, what I actually want to get here is I want to get all products that have quantity over 0, and then I want to have the total price of all of them combined. Okay, so it's basically this filter method with this reduce that we had, right? So let's do that. So I'm going to just say items in stock, prices in stock. Okay, and so what we're going to say is products dot filter. Okay, and then remember we've got our anonymous function here where we're going to go and pass in a single product, and what we're going to return is product dot quantity. Sorry, dot quantity is greater than 0. Okay, so now before we even code a little bit more, like it's good to challenge yourself and see how much you can code without breaking it, but it's a good way to waste your time. So, you know, just rather just console log, see where you are and keep going forward. Okay, so now we've filtered all of our products where the quantity is greater than 0. So you can see we don't have any more now where the quantity is, basically the quantity is all greater than 0 there. Okay, so now we've filtered. Now let's go and reduce. Okay, so you can see here now I'm going to put a dot reduce at the end here. Okay, and then in the reduce we're going to have a total, and then you're going to have your item that's coming through, and let's go into here. You'll see how when we go, you should try and get into the habit of this. We haven't got into formatters yet and linters. Basically, it's prettier. You'll see it here at the bottom of my screen here. And when I'm saving, it's actually formatting my code for me, right? But if you don't have anything in here, it's going to close it. So a quick trick that I just often do is just go and just Control/ to create comments there so that when you save, it's not going and collapsing it. Otherwise, it's going to drive you mad. It's going to keep collapsing it until you actually put code in there. Okay, so now you can see we're chaining our methods now. We've got products coming in our array, right? Then it gets filtered, and now we're going to reduce. Okay, so I know what we want to do here is we want to be have a look at the prices. So I know that total should start at 0. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to return total, because total must always get returned, your cumulative, and I'm going to say total is plus equal to, actually I don't do plus equal, total is equal to total plus item dot price. Okay, and I'm going to save it, and then I'll go and I'll log. So now what this has done is it's gone and filtered all of our items that has quantity above 0, and then it combines all of the prices of just those items. And now we have got this value here. Okay, so I'm just trying to think of how many other ways we could have gone with this to try and chain as many methods as possible. But I think I wanted to try and keep it simple. Do you all understand sort of what was going on here, or should I try and explain it again?
I've got one question. When reduce returns something, why does it return all 9s at the end? Doesn't it just add up to 2 decimal places? Why does it add up to so many?
It's probably from some like overflow that it's got.
Okay.
It has to be, because we're not timesing or anything. So what it's probably some overflow. That's why when you're actually using JavaScript currencies, and it's not something I'm going to be going into this video, it's part of another one that I've already actually planned for. You don't actually have decimal places. When you calculate your prices, you actually do this, and then right at the end, to avoid this sort of overflow issue, because that's what JavaScript does. Like, okay, for example, look at this. What do you think the answer to 0.1 but 0 plus 0.2 is?
Isn't that going to be 0.3 something something?
Yeah, that should just be 0.3, right?
Mm.
But it's 0.300000004. So that's just the limitation of programming languages. I know a lot of people say that it's a JavaScript thing, but from what I remember correctly, this is not a JavaScript thing. This is basically just like overflow. Yeah, so you end up with situations like this, where it's not supposed to be like this. And in currency, it can be a problem. So what you tend to do is you deal with your values like this, but I don't want to confuse issues there. So what's probably happened over here is the exact same example here, where it's just got this sort of overflow value.
Okay.
Cool. Okay. Any other questions at this stage?
So I think I'll just go and try it myself, and I'll probably understand it better. But I just have one question. How would you, like, if you want to multiply the quantity or the price with the quantity, like if there's 5 with the cheese and you just want to multiply it so that you can see what the total of that is, how would you?
Super simple. Like, this item here is still that same product. So for example, I just go console log item, right? And there's our items there. Remember, always console log your stuff. Like, I don't like when people are flying blind and then they're just guessing things. Immediately we can see our item here. Okay, so there's our items. So we just go and say total is plus item price times by item dot quantity. Save it. Now what it's doing is it's calculating this times by this and adding that total. So what I can actually do here is just go and say, let's do another string template here. So item price times by item quantity. So just to give you just a better understanding of what's going on here. Okay, so it gets this first one and it says 12.55 times 5 is 62.75, and then it adds that to the total. Then it does the same thing, adds it to the total. So you can see, look how we're manipulating data to such a great extent. To try and do a lot of the stuff manually is just so much code that you have to write. And you will see that people can bring down thousands of lines of code to 100 lines by doing this. Like, I literally did this 3 weeks ago. I had to redo a product page that had a list of items, and it was so sluggish from React states and everything, and just did some research and then rewrote it. Just basically a filter that runs into, I think, another map and another filter, and reduced that down to like less than 100 lines of code from this like massive thousand lines of code. Yeah, so but to get to, like, don't let it intimidate you. It is probably one of the most challenging things you're going to learn in JavaScript. Just keep practicing it. Like, do the lead coding stuff, especially the what is it? It's not HackerRank, the Code Wars ones. I'll drop a link to that. The reason why I say the Code Wars ones is because you can. I'll just bring it over here. With Code Wars, at the end, you can see all the solutions, and usually people vote the solutions, or you can vote the solutions, and right at the top, you will see one-liners. And when I say one-liner, it refers to people chaining it like this. And I'm not going to be expecting you to get that good, but you need to, it'll open your mind as to what you can achieve by doing stuff like this. Okay. If you guys have any more questions regarding the array methods, please feel free to ask. But what I want to do now is I just want to step onto destructuring. I don't believe we actually covered this last session, and it's just important. Like, I really do want to cover it. So if you do have more questions, please just feel free to ask, but I'm going to move on to destructuring for now. Okay, so the next thing I need to be showing you, and it's actually super important, is destructuring. Do any of you want to any of you know what destructuring is?
That's basically when you're taking an object and there's a few items that are returned. So you basically declare it as a variable. if I'm getting my definition right.
Yeah, no, your point comes across. It's basically you accessing the properties from an object in a very, very clean way. You can initialize the values out of it. Okay, so let's take an object here that we will just call it a person, right? So const person, and I think we did we actually cover this last week? I can't remember. I'm not sure if we did.
I don't think so. I can't remember now.
Okay. It's so important that we actually do this. Because the whole time I was sort of like cringing that I'm not doing it. And a lot of the stuff, like we should have been destructuring over here. For example, an item, we could have gone and destructured here. So let's do the example and we'll go back to destructuring. We'll destructure that as sort of practical case. Okay, so we've got an object here, right? Okay, we know immediately it's an object because it's got the square brackets and it's got keys. So there's a key and there's a value. That's what an object is. Now, usually if we want to access these values, say we want to get first name and last name and age. To get them, I have to go and say const first name is equal to person dot first name, right? Because we're saying first name is equal to person dot, when we say dot, we're going inside here, first name, right? So does that make sense? Yeah, I'm just going to assume that it does. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So now let's do the same thing with last name. It's person dot last name, right? And then finally, const age is equal to person dot age. Okay. So we've now gone and we've taken these values out of this object. So imagine this object came from like an API, right? So we didn't create it. We just get given this API. Now we want to use these values out of this object that we got from the API. So we can get first name like this, last name, and age. But now what happens if they decide to change this to person object? Now we need to go to this now and change person object. We need to go to the next one, change person object, and then this next one, change person object. And it's just a lot. What if there were 100 fields here? You know, becomes problematic. So there is a much cleaner way of doing this, and it's not complicated. Like I know it's gonna look complicated, and I know I've been there. You're gonna be like, "What the hell is this stuff?" It's gonna look complicated, but it's super basic. I promise you, it's actually super basic. Don't let this stuff like take charge of you. Like a lot of the stuff is actually basic, but we intimidate ourselves, and then we create like mental blocks. Meanwhile, it's actually like a really basic principle that's following. So what we can do, instead of writing them out line by line here, is we can actually do it all in one line, okay? And the way you do it is this. You say const, and we're going to put all of these values inside here, but just not yet. So we say const, and we put our sort of squiggly brackets, and then we equal to the person object, or whatever object we want to do. Now, inside of here, we can write any of the properties that we want. Okay, so let me just take that out, otherwise it's going to clash. So now I'm going to put control spacebar, and I can actually start seeing the names because it's basically got TypeScript built into it. And I could just go and basically destructure the properties out of that object. So this is exactly the same thing as this. It's exactly the same thing. It's just a shorter way of basically getting our values out of it. So if you now decide to go and say, I want this to be called person again, I just go like, easy peasy. I just go and delete it at the end like that. So this is exactly the same thing as this. And I know it does sort of look weird, and your mind's trying to wrap you, like, why, like trying to make sense of this. And it really is just that you're just taking these properties. When I say properties, I mean these keys here. You're just taking these properties out of the object. And it's just another way of writing it. Instead of writing it with 50 different lines, we can just do it in one line like this. So just to put that into effect, and I'll show you why it's so cool, is that, for example, over here, right, this item is that product object, right? It's this product here. Now what I could have actually done here is actually destructured right on the spot here. Okay, this is going to be a bit higher level than what we just went through, but I just want to show you how it can actually make everything a lot cleaner. Okay, is actually, let's keep it back into item. So yeah, we got product, and it's got all of this ID, name, price, quantity. I don't want product at quantity. I'm just going to have quantity. So I'm actually going to destructure quantity out of it. Okay, now I don't have to say product, and that's the exact same thing as me saying product dot quantity. this destructuring here is the same as destructuring it over here. It's just becomes a bit shorter. Okay, so now if you're freaking out at this, don't worry. Like you've got all right to freak out because it's a little bit foreign. Okay, but I'm just trying to show you how this can be used so that when you do come across it in code, at least you do have like a sort of a little bit of an understanding of why it is happening. Okay, so now all of these items here, I don't want to use them. I just want to destructure it and then just have these values directly so that it's a lot easier to code because this is a mess. I mean, let's keep this here, right? And we'll do a comparison when we're finished. So let's destructure item. We just got to know exactly what properties we want out of it. So inside here, it's actually already going to show it if I control spacebar. So let's take ID, name, price, quantity. Okay, so now we've got all of them. And inside here, I'm going to take item because now we don't have item anymore. We just got the properties from our object. So I'm going to take that out, and that out, and that out, and that out, and that out, that out, delete, save. Okay, so this now is the exact same as this over here, but just do comparison of the two together. Like, you know, this is such a mess that it's actually done alarm break. Pretty is given alarm break because it's past a certain length. So can you see that this is now just so much cleaner than this over here? But it is a higher level of programming in JavaScript. But you know, if I slowly start throwing these things at you, slowly but slowly, you're going to understand it before you really have to start applying it, or hopefully. Okay, so that's destructuring. Now, that was destructuring an object. You can actually do the same thing with an array, but it's a lot rarer. So let's have a look at destructuring an array. And the principle is exactly the same. So let's say we've got just values, math values, right? So let's just say math values. And then inside here, there's just a bunch of garbage. And it's probably like values from a graph or something of the sort. Now, the way you could destructure an array is that we can actually give these values a name. So I'll show you, like, let's say I wanted to use these first two values out of this array. Now I would have to have gone like this. I'll have to go array item 1 is equal to math values, and I have to put like that to select that, right? Because this is the array, and then the 0 index, which selects that. Now if I wanted item number 2, actually let's just call it 0 so that it matches. Now item number 1, it's going to be this one, and I have to keep doing that, right? But it's such a schlep, and it's untidy. And what if this changes? Then this has to change. So much better way to do it. We can go and say array item 0, array item 1 is equal to math values. So this is now the equivalent as this. It knows that the 0 item, the first item must be the 0 index, so it's going to be this one. Then it knows the next item is going to be this one. And then what you got after that is a rest operator or spread operator. And then this is the rest of your array. So we selected the first one here, right? So this one's this one. Then we selected this one, which is the 65. And then this with the 3 dots means everything else. So let me just show you what I mean by that. Rest of array. So when I'm just going to have to comment that out. I'm just trying to ignore the clutter at the top here. So just to show you, we went and let's make it 333. Okay. So we got our first one here by destructuring it like that. Then we got our second one here, which is that one. And then the ... means everything else. And then when we console log this one, you can see here 33321, 33321. So you see it's now actually the rest of the items. And you will see this, like, to find the right place to use this is going to be quite rare. But if you use React, you will actually see it a lot. Like, for example, in React, you'll see something like const my state set my state is equal to use state. And so this is the exact same thing. You're actually destructuring. Use state will actually return you an array with 2 values, and you set this to the first value and you set that to the second value. Okay, so that is destructuring an array. And I also want to show you where this can be quite useful is often when you're dealing with map values, you get something like this. And I feel like I'm the most smartest person on this planet. So when you get these map values, yeah, I just feel like a genius. What you can do is you can go const x, y is equal to map values, right? Right? That's cool, right? So basically what it's saying is that x is this map value 0 index, and then y is map values 1 index, right? So you didn't have to go const x is equal to map values 0. You can just do this. Sorry, let me just do the equivalent here. So you now instead of this, this is just so like year 2000. This is like 2021. I feel next level when I do stuff like this. And there's actually another place when I think you're doing events, button events and all of that. I think there's another place where you can pull them out like this. I just can't remember off the top of my head. Okay, everybody, I wanted to run onto JS docs as well, but we don't have the time for that. I hope the session has been useful to you. I know that we didn't have like really complex examples, but I didn't want to go and scare you away from map filter and all of that. But those three together are massive. Like if I was to give you tell you to learn one thing in JavaScript, it will be the array methods. Just because you can basically do anything with them at the end of the day. Next week is going to be a big one for all of you. Really, really big one. We're going to be looking at, firstly, right at the end, hopefully, JS docs, which is you can document your functions and all of that. So let me just give you a very quick example to show you what's coming in store next week. So I'm just going to say my function. And so what JS docs is, and it's built in. You go /**, and then you see it pop up, right? And now you can actually write a description for your function. This is my function, okay? And there's more things. You can actually go and say what it returns. So I think you can go and say like a string and say returns my value. Okay, so now with JS docs, you can generate documentation. It will automatically generate documentation when you write your documentation like this. And also, look what happens when I actually try to call my function. Can you see that description now appears? So if someone else is working on your code, they will get all this information regarding your function. Okay, so JS docs we're going to be looking at next week. And then the big one is we're going to be doing the interview questions. And I don't mean interview tasks like go build a shop and all of that. We will do that eventually. We're talking about closure, hoisting. I know there's like 5 that typically gets asked. And I will just dumb it down so that you guys so that everyone can have like a really good understanding of these, because it always gets asked in JavaScript interviews, and it is something that you should actually just be aware of and that you should know. But trying to learn about it gets really complicated. So I think we have one session dedicated to it, and then we hopefully cover all of that so that you know it well. Right. Okay, so time's about to run out. Are there any questions that any of you have?
No.
Nothing from my side.
Okay. All good, but thank you for the session.
Right, and just as a reminder, our sessions are sponsored by Code Capsules. They've got hosting services for us in South Africa, sort of like Netify and those software as a service, I think it's called. Sorry, I think it's a platform as a service, PaaS, and we're going to start building projects with them, and I'm just amazed at how fast they are. It's just so blitzfast. Right. Okay, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining the session. I hope it has been useful to you, and be sure to be practicing your filters and reduce and map methods this week if you can.